We're going to talk about what's next after this boot camp. If you're going to go off and start your venture, the first thing you're probably going to do is you're going to want to build your team. It might be the team you're working with today. I know that there is a success story from the boot camp of three folks who met on a team just like yours. One was in Colombia, one was in Mexico and Brazil. And Brazil. And they left the boot camp, started a company, and they're still working together. So magic can happen here. Open your hearts to it. So today we're going to talk about what the research says about teams. We're also going to hear from folks who have started their companies, who have built teams, who have worked in small teams and in large teams. And we're going to give you just some tactical advice on how to build teams when you're broke, right? So if you're starting just with an idea and zero money, how do you get there? So we're going to base a lot of the research discussion on this book, and I apologize that it's a little blurry, but has anyone here read this book, The Founder's Dilemma by Noam Wasserman? No? 1, 2, 3. Okay. What is your name, young man? With the blue shirt, who read the book? Mark. What was one of the highlights of the books for you? Like, what did you learn that you were like, oh, I didn't know that. That makes a lot of sense. That's okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but just wonder if you remembered anything. Well, Noam Wasserman is a professor at Harvard Business School. He conducted research with over 10,000 founders. And we're going to go over some of the surprising highlights of that research. We're going to send you this sheet so that you can have it as well. And this is going to be the basis of the discussion for a panel with some of the coaches who have companies and some who have started multiple companies. I would ask that you save your questions till the end so that we can have a rich discussion. You're going to hear stuff, you're going to have questions, then you're going to have real people actually talking about that experience, and then from there, we'll go into Q&A. Okay, so some of the surprising facts here have to do with the founder and CEO. So I don't know if most of you think you're going to go on to be the founder and CEO of your company. But you want to really think about that when you start forming your teams. You want to make sure that you form teams that are diverse, people with diverse technical backgrounds. So Bill already went through the hacker, hipster, and hustler. People with diverse life experiences and perspectives, because that's just going to make your team better performing. There's research. I'm also happy to share that. Harvard Business Review and McKinsey, that teams with gender, racial, ethnic, and other types of diversity outperform homogeneous teams. So, and we're going to go into one of these points here. Maybe I'll start there. Starting companies with your friends and/or family is one of the riskiest things you can do. Of those 10,000 founders that this book is based on, the teams that were most successful were teams that were started between people who worked together before. So if you were in a job previously, you had a colleague there, you worked together, starting a company with someone like that, the boot camp is an experience of having worked with someone together. You've established a rapport. There's, professional respect and balance and complementary skills. But when you start it with your friends, with your significant others, and sometimes family-owned businesses, but not always, those are the teams that were more likely to fail. You will also see today examples of people defying that. We do have successful examples of, husband and wives starting businesses together and friends starting businesses together. But overall, the data says that to optimize your chances of success in forming your team, you want to have worked with someone before in some capacity. So now let's talk a little bit about some of these surprising facts, particularly around CEO. So more than 50% of founder CEOs will be replaced. Okay, so think about that for a second. If you are going to found a company, this is your baby, your idea, 50% chance that you're going to be replaced. Just want that to sink in. Let's just hold them to the end. I know we want to know why. We can unpack a lot of this. They all vary, and I don't want to spend too much time. I'm happy to, I'm going to share this out. You will have all this information. I just want to give you a lot of food for thought here before we sit with a panel of entrepreneurs. Another surprising finding is that whatever your entrepreneurial strength going in to start your company and your team will potentially become a liability. So think of your startup is going to need different skills at different times. The faster your company scales, the more likely the CEO is to be replaced. For those companies that grow a little slower, they potentially have more time to build the skills that they need for the next stage, right? So very early on, you need to convince people to join your team. You need to raise money. You're selling an idea. From then on, you need to make revenue. So it's about selling and building a great product. From there on, it's scaling that proposition. And so at every level, your team's going to require different skill sets. In 73% of founder CEO replacements, the founder was fired rather than voluntarily stepping down. So the minute you raise money, there are other people who come into your company who become your bosses, and they can fire you. Surprisingly, though, for a lot of founders who leave their startups, joining the board actually is a better way for them to contribute to the startup. Yes?
My impression with that, when you raise money, other people come in that could fire you, is that some of that's negotiable, right? I know that's probably...
You mean what your terms are?
Yeah, what the terms are. I understand that some venture capitalists require that. I don't know if all of them do, but I think there's some room for...
Ed, yep, go for it.
Happy to talk about that. Yeah, I mean, practically, if your terms are awesome, everything's negotiable. If it's not perfect, you can get your super fast. It's all about the power dynamics of who owns what, how much, and yeah, some venture firms are more family-friendly, some are less. But if they're thinking about replacing you, it's already probably not going to work out. So it's negotiating terms that from a position.
And one other thing I just want to touch on before I give you just some practical tips on where to go to find teammates. Most of the problems, so people problems are the leading cause of why startups fail. People problems. Not your technology, not your business model, people problem. And those people problems are in 3 buckets. Relationship problems, so the founders just don't get along. Decision-making problems. You have a hard time making decisions. And I know all of you, right, this whole week we've been really struggling with, okay, how are we going to make decisions? Let's figure out a process. Let's stick to it. So this is all, you're simulating a high-pressured environment because this is how it is in the real world. And then third, rewards problem. Equity splits and other incentives. So one of the findings here is that companies that also do equity splits at the beginning, it's like, okay, we just met, great, let's start a company, 50% for you, 50% for me. Also, the earlier you do that, the higher your chances of failure are. So instead of me sitting here to tell you why I think all of these things are true, before we jump into the panel, so we can hear and you can ask questions directly and you can see different models. We're going to have solo founders. We're going to have serial entrepreneurs. We're going to have entrepreneurs who started companies with friends and family and significant others. We're going to have people who have great founder stories and people who've had not so great founder stories. Just a couple of quick ideas of where you can go, tactical ideas to build your team. So I like to call, so this presentation is called Attracting Talent When You're Broke. So Reid Hoffman said, no matter how brilliant your mind or strategy, if you're playing the solo game, you'll always lose out to a team. There's only so much you can do on your own, and so you need to build a team. Ideally, you want to go out and get other people really, really excited about your vision so that they can be co-founders with you. But companies are started all different ways. So where can you go to meet people who are eager to start companies like you? Hackathons. Hackathons, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, are usually weekend events where you go pitch an idea, a couple people get together, you try to build something, you pitch at the end. Kind of like this boot camp. Co-working spaces. So hanging out in co-working spaces, going to the events that they have there, whether it's talks or networking events, kind of like what we did 2 days ago, is also a great way to meet people who potentially be interested in what you're doing. Meetups, not just in co-working spaces. So whatever your area of interest is, if it's climate change, if it's education, robotics, whatever it is, figure out how to join an online community and then find the events in person when those things are happening. I have found that to be a good way of really meeting people, of getting your idea out there, vetting it. Another way to build teams is if you're a student, fellow students. You work on final projects together in class. You might have shared interests. So I'll talk a little bit about my company in more detail later, but I started my company with 2 other students. Class projects, sometimes you have students who, instead of taking another class, they want to work on something concrete. They find an advisor, and they can work with you. They can be your founder, or they could just kind of contribute during that class project. Independent studies, student clubs. So, you know, a lot of schools have entrepreneurship clubs, big data clubs, you know, engineering clubs, education clubs, another good way to, and you don't necessarily have to be a student to do that. You can work with students that way. So as a student, it's easier to meet other students, but if you're not a student, after I graduated from MIT is when I started working with students. And let's say you are ready to hit the ground running, you know, you're trying to build your founding team and find co-founders, and you're trying to find other people who are going to, you know, put in the sweat equity. But sometimes you might not be a technical founder and you want a prototype build so you can go show everyone what it is that you're trying to do. Obviously, after you've done your PMR and everything you've learned here, there are contractors that you can find depending on, you know, on what kind of budget you have. And where can you get money to kind of get started? Pitching competitions. That's how I got started. $1,000 here, $3,000 there, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Paid for the first, you know, couple of prototypes that then got us our first customer. You also really want, so don't just think of your team as the hacker, hipster, hustler. Advisors and mentors also add a ton of value to your team. And I would argue that these are a lot easier to find than people to join your startup right away. And what advisors and mentors can do for you, like they've done for me and a lot of my peers, is they'll introduce you to potential, right? Because they advise, they know a bunch of other folks like you who are out there trying to start companies, and they'll say, oh, so-and-so just folded her company. Now might be a good time for you to reach out to him or her or they. Conferences, schools, accelerators, incubators, basically spaces where people get together to generate ideas. So those are all a couple of suggestions for you as you leave Monday comes around, because I'm sure after tomorrow you're going to take the weekend and catch up on sleep, and you're going to want to start your ventures, whether it's Monday, whether it's a year from now. These are just some tactical places where you can go to meet people and to kind of get your idea out there.